to the Complete Guide to Design training course, your practical guide to design. We open the course here with some words from Paul Smithson, CEO of Intellimon, makers of this course. Let's talk design. For many people, design is one of the more challenging parts of building a website. In this presentation, we aim to demystify the subject and give some simple, effective rules and guidance that you can follow over and over again. And just to set the context for this course, there are two types of design abilities really, or skill sets: learned and instinctive. This course won't make you a more creative person intrinsically, but we will be giving you practical skills that you can use to significantly improve the quality of the design that you do and to get the most out of your innate eye for design. And yes, we do all have at least some kind of an eye for design, even if we don't yet realize it. Now, this course is going to centre predominantly about designing for the web, so a website, but 99% of the design know-how that we're going to be imparting in this course is just as relevant for somebody wanting to, say, design a brochure or a logo, pretty much anything, in fact. So without further ado, let's get started and take a look at the agenda of what we're going to be covering off. First of all, the relative importance of design, that is, the importance of design relative to things like content. You might actually be surprised to learn where design fits relative to things like content. Next, we'll be looking at objectives and planning. Good business practice requires that we take time to set objectives and to plan. It's just as relevant when we're talking about design within our business. After that, we'll move on to fundamental principles. These are the fundamentals, the absolute design essentials. It's crucial that you understand these if you're going to be able to use design effectively. Design tools, we'll be looking at some of the tools available to you to use to create effective design, and we'll be giving you some information so that you can decide which tool is the most appropriate for you. Working with layouts, we'll be talking about how to decide what should go where, the importance of the different areas within your web pages, within your design. Working with text, there are lots of things you need to know when you're working with text. There's a lot more to it than just typing words on a page, so we'll be getting into that and how we can actually leverage best practice. We'll also be looking at working with images, one of the scariest parts of design for the less artistically inclined. So we'll be looking at where you can get good quality images, how to use them, what you should be doing with them, how to edit them, and so on. We'll also be looking at working with colours. It's an often overlooked but crucially important part of design, and we're going to give you some great tips for making your site look super professional. And we'll round off the course with some practical hands-on demonstrations, some tips and tricks to achieve different design effects, particularly those design elements that you come across time and time again on the better performing sites out there. So lots to cover off in this course right now. So we're starting with relative importance. How important is design in the overall scheme of things? First of all, the 80-20 content versus design rule. This is pretty much akin to the Pareto principle. Generally speaking, 80% of your design should be content biased. It could even be 90-10, to be quite honest. The reason being that it's possible to have a poor looking site with great content that does well, but it's near impossible to have a good looking site with no content do well. Content in the short to medium term is much more important. So here we have the point. It is possible to be successful with poor quality design, but it's near impossible to achieve success without good content. The content, and particularly the copy, the message, the actual words, they come first, always. So it's important that we set the context here right at the start of this course, some realistic expectations as to the role that design has to play. Content is the priority. Yes, design is important, and we'll see exactly why in this course, but you ought to be able to cover off design quite comfortably, which is reassuring for you because a lot of people are worried about design, particularly those new to it. Now, I've made a fairly bold statement there that it's possible to be successful with poor quality design or perceivably poor quality design. We can look at a couple of examples in the Alexa top 100 ranked sites to see that whilst they perhaps don't look particularly visually arresting, they are in fact incredibly successful sites. So I'm just going to call up a couple of sites right now. So here we have the Alexa.com top 500 sites on the web. And if you scroll down the list results there, you'll find, I think it's on page 2 here, the first of our quick examples, which is Craigslist. Let's see, where have we got Craigslist? There we go, number 36. So arguably the 36th most popular site on the web, Craigslist. If I click through to that site, you can see that in design terms, at least what most people associate with design, it doesn't look particularly like it's had a great deal of attention spent on the design. It really just looks like some basic lists. And if you look at the alignments and the font styles and things, it's really kind of design definitely playing second fiddle to the content right here. And yet, of course, Craigslist is a phenomenally successful site worldwide. So there's a good illustration of design perhaps not being prioritized, certainly not being prioritized over content, and yet an incredibly successful site. Another site that features in the top Alexa ranked sites is this torrent site called Mininova. Again, hugely popular site, massively trafficked, and yet, as you can see, again, not the most aesthetically pleasing of sites. It's pretty basic table listings of torrents that are available, yet, as I say, incredibly successful. So 2 good examples there of sites that have clearly prioritized the content over design, yet achieving phenomenal success. The takeaway here is this: you don't have to be a classically trained artist or designer to create a successful website. It's much more important in the general scheme of things that the content offering is right first off. The design can pretty much flow from there. And it's certainly fair to say that it's the content that's going to bring visitors to your site in the first place and then have them return again and again. It's extremely unlikely that somebody's going to come back to your site simply because they like looking at your header graphic, for example. So if the design element is less important than content, what exactly is the role that design plays? Well, the role that design plays is this: it's more of a point of difference, a differentiator, creating and reinforcing brand values, setting the tone and emotions for the site, enhancing the user experience, helping users interact with content in as intuitive a way as possible, and making that experience overall of accessing your content a pleasurable one. These are the things that the application of good design will achieve. On the screen right now, we've got a matrix with 4 quadrants. Now, looking at quadrant number 1 in the top right, you have sites that fall into this category. They have quality content and they have quality design. Moving across to the left, quadrant 2, you have sites that, whilst they still have quality content, they've got poor design, okay, on that scale left to right of poor through quality design. Quadrant 3, bottom right-hand corner, you've got sites that have perhaps poor content but good design. And then finally, bottom left-hand corner, quadrant 4, we have sites that have both poor design and poor content. And it's pretty clear where you want to be. You're moving really through the red, orange, yellow, ultimately onto the green quadrant as for where you should be aspiring to be with your site. In an ideal world, your site wants to be, of course, in position 1. Great content, fantastic design, the best of both worlds. A much more realistic objective, however, at least to start out, is to aim for number 2, quadrant 2 in the top left-hand corner there. To have reasonable design, but fabulous quality content. At the outset, don't set the design bar too high. If you're in any way limited for time, then you want to focus on content first, not design. What you don't want to do, and this is a classic mistake, is focus first and foremost on design. Looks great, but no substance, so to speak. The reason doing that is a recipe for disaster? Well, ask yourself the question, what is it that's going to have people find your site in the first place and then have them come back and back to your site? You're not going to find people saying, as I said a moment ago, I'd just love to go and visit that site with a great header graphic again. It's the content, it's the meat that brings people back. Obviously, you don't want to be in the quadrant 3 and definitely not in quadrant 4. So initially, you want to set your stall, set your target on getting into position 2 in this matrix. Reasonable quality design, and there's more than enough information in this course to get you there, no problem at all. And then gradually, over time, you want to aim to improve the design look and feel of your site, and in doing so, move from position 2 to 1, but not at the cost of content. You should obviously be continuing to add great quality content all the while as a priority. Now, we'll be looking at some sites later on that have done just that, content first and then design over time. Another of the models that we advocate in this course is something called the design continuum. Here's a normal distribution curve. It shows how much focus sites have on design. So on a scale of less focus to more focus along the x-axis here, and typically speaking, most sites fall somewhere around the middle of the distribution, the mean. So not too much and not too little design. That's the bulk of the area under the graph here in the middle. That's the bulk of sites out there, 80 to 90% of sites. The sites that are particularly design heavy, that is the high-end concept sites, art project sites or portfolio sites, things like that, they sit way over on the right-hand side under the more blue area of the distribution curve. As you can see from the area marked blue, this is only a fraction of sites out there. These are definitely not the norm. These are sites that put design right at the top of the agenda, often even over content. And I can show you a couple of examples of sites like that right now. Here's an example. This is an architect's website. And so if I want to, for example, find out a little bit about who's in the company, I could obviously see from the navigation here, meet the group. And it's Blatt's Coffee on the wooden tabletop, which takes a while to then bring up a sort of faded image. No information other than just images. So I kind of mouse over these and I would have to click on one to get a bit of information. Okay, so that's that. I could look at a portfolio. I get a slightly odd animation of a straw sucking the coffee spilt on the table up. The point I'm making is really, is the animation, are the graphics really relevant and really conducive to communicating what they're trying to get across? Do I really need to have a cup of coffee spilt over a table with the faces of the architects appearing in the coffee? Is that the best way of communicating that information? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Your decision really, but I'm just showing you some sites that really use design in a pretty full-on way. The portfolio as well being displayed in the back of a digital camera. Is that essential? Maybe, maybe not. Let's try long-term care. Scrolling a book that then needs me to, I suppose, click the View Now button, which if I click takes me to a new page. Okay, so it's a pop-up basically to a new page. That's a good example of a site that really does use design very heavily. Let's take a look at another just now. This is the Stem Cell Foundation website, stemcellfoundation.ca. And you can see that they actually have a bunch of moving faces as navigation options basically on the homepage. And if I mouse over them, I get a section of content or a link to different sections of the site. But the point here is that they're using this very clever sort of moving faces imagery on the homepage, but that you kind of have to like move over them to see what it is that they're linking through to. And again, you may have an opinion as to whether that's effective or not, but it's very design led. So a couple of examples there of sites that use design, perhaps in the more end of the distribution curve there. You might have to question perhaps the balance between the use of design and the ease with which a visitor to that site or to those sites can access the content that they're looking for. That's the question, and we'll be talking about the purpose of design and how it's supposed to help find information these days more so than ever in just a moment. On the leftmost side, the less end of the distribution curve, we have the extremely functional sites. These are sites that are all about the information, and they don't seem to focus much at all on design. And we looked at a couple of examples of those sites where content really was prioritized, like Craigslist. But the sites here in the blue area are probably even more content focused still, and we'll be looking at more examples later on. Another quote from Paul Smithson here. I want to free you from the idea that you have to spend hours designing. You don't. It's much more important early on that you focus on building your content. And it's a good point that Paul makes here. So many people focus on design when they really should be focusing on content. It's all about content from the outset. And I know we've been saying this a few times over the last couple of slides, but it really is that important. It's also quite liberating to know that the design doesn't have to be perfect right from the start, that you can get a site up there and have success with a website that's not overly designed. This isn't to say that you can forget all about design, however. You do need to watch on, you do need to sit the rest of this course, but watch on with the knowledge that it's perhaps not urgent to get the design perfect from the start. We can look at some examples of some of the leading brands online and see how they are approaching design to give us some perspective here, how much they're prioritizing design in regards to content. Now, we've got 5 brands here that you're probably familiar with: Amazon, Apple, eBay, Google, and Microsoft. And we're going to take a look at each of those now in a browser and just make a few observations about how much or how little they're using or leveraging design in their websites. So very quickly, first of all, Amazon. As you can see here, a very nice, clean and well-designed site. Fairly subtle colours used. They've used a sort of a darker blue and orange to highlight certain areas of navigation. And then you've got clearly in the top left-hand corner of the screen a very strong navigation feature. Obviously, Amazon is such a huge department store. It's essential that people be able to find the products that they're looking for in the store. So obviously, navigation is always going to be a prominent feature of Amazon. Those of you who knew Amazon of years ago will know that they used to have lots of tabs across the top navigation area, but now they seem to have focused more on a left-hand vertical navigation, which is interesting. They've obviously used design very effectively to pick out certain product promotions. They're obviously heavily promoting. Look how much of the real estate on this page here they devote to the Kindle, and obviously on the right-hand side they've also got some advertisements there as well. And then below, as we scroll below the fold, we'll talk about what below the fold is later on. You'll see they actually have picked out certain products as well. They're obviously recommending products they think that I, having signed into my Amazon account, might think are of interest. So that's Amazon. Very functional, not overly designed, nice and clear. Lots of white space, as you can see. Let's hop over to eBay. Now, eBay is perhaps a little bit more designed. You see a lot more in the way of logos, flashes, call-outs, again, prominent left-hand vertical navigation. They've become slightly cleaner in design than they used to be. They used to be more sort of highlights and fluorescent green section breaks and things like that. But now they seem to have toned down the design a little bit. It's more about white space, clean, crisp graphics than it used to be. Quite subtle, the design, nice and functional, not overly designed once again. So an interesting use of design here. Again, they've got sort of product focus is here in the center of the screen there. Microsoft, they exist in a particularly special place because unlike Amazon and eBay, the purpose of the Microsoft site is not in fact to directly sell products. It's more of an information proposition, a communication and brand building exercise. So the information on the Microsoft site is primarily about promoting the company, its values and its products, but not actually making the sale on the site there. So consequently, the designers have had perhaps a little bit more freedom in terms of use of design than the functional Amazon and eBay sites that we looked at a second ago. It's more about corporate presentation and communication of brand values. So, you can find out about the different products. Obviously, navigation is essential. They have rather a large selection of products available, as you know. But it's pretty clean again, not lots of space. You can see, look at the underneath the section of content here in the main panel. You have all this space here that's designed to give a nice light feel to the page. Okay, so that's Microsoft. Let's hop on to Apple. Now, Apple are probably the epitome of website design. It's an example used by many people when they're looking at design online. It is a very designed site. Very much a brand building exercise once again, and communication. Design, as we all know, plays a crucial part of the Apple brand, and so this of course has to extend onto their website. They're trying to create a community who buy into the Apple design, the Apple aesthetic. And that extends obviously into their products as much as their website. The design values that one associates with Apple, cool, clean, contemporary design, minimalist, subtle, these qualities are all evident here on this website. So the menus are understated. The colors are understated, grays and whites and blacks. Only a hint of blue for links, leveraging best practice there. We'll be talking about that later. They've got obviously clear jump-offs into their different sections of content on their site. So clearly promoting the iPhone 4, but also underneath, as you can see, introducing the Daily, the MacBook Air, the Mac App Store, and their television ads. But if you think how much information that Apple have to communicate, it's amazing how clean and simple their homepage is. There really isn't much to it. You could take a look at their sitemap if you wanted to. I'm just clicking the sitemap link there, and you'll actually get a better sense of how much information there is within the Apple site. And you can see there as the page loads that there are actually masses and masses of sections of content. These are sections within the site, not individual web pages. So you can see that you could, if they had wanted to, they could have had an incredibly complex navigation system on the homepage. They could have had all sorts of call outs and features, but they haven't. They've chosen to go for a nice clean design with lots of white space. Look at all that white space on that homepage above the fold there. Very little information, in fact. All you have literally on the homepage is the picture of the iPhone 4 and the links to the main sections of the site. So very well designed, very stylish. Google, just on the other end of the scale, really, in terms of design, we can see the famous Google page. It's purely functional. Now, we've seen the Google logo changing regularly, of course, but that's really their one major concession to design. 99% of the page design here at Google is about performing the core function. It's making the process of loading this page and performing searches as simple and as quick as possible. And speed plays a crucial part in Google's service. So to maximize that, they've had to be quite mercenary when it comes to design. They want people to focus on the core proposition that is Google, that is search. Other Google products, if you look at them, are a little bit more designed than Google. So if you go and look at Gmail or Google Reader or any of the other Google services, you'll find that there is more design going on. Certainly Google.com, the search part of Google's brand offering, is super focused on the core function. And so they strip away anything design-wise that's not necessary. That said, the other Google products that you might use, maybe Google Docs, they all have the same core design value, usability and speed over heavy graphical design content. So these were just very quick reviews of some example sites. And overall, we can see a couple of important things in these comparisons. Firstly, we can see a design for purpose going on. Clearly, the information-packed retail sites like Amazon and eBay use design sparingly, focusing on the content. Yet where they do use design, they do so very effectively to help section off content and highlight products, which of course they hope to sell. Equally, we see for sites like Microsoft and Apple how design can be used as a brand building and communication tool. Both of these sites attempt to extend their core brand values onto their site to reinforce people's positive perceptions of their products. And at the other end of the scale, we see sites like Google, and you could probably count Craigslist here too, which absolutely prioritize function over form. They've stripped everything that's not essential out to maximize the key performance characteristics of their service. In Google's case, they're looking to make search simple and fast. Anything that eats into that, i.e. graphical content that slows the page load or sections of content that detract from the core function, they're kept off the page. And secondly, we could map these sites onto our distribution to see how we might position or plot these sites onto our graph. So here we can see the 5 sites that we just looked at briefly on our distribution curve. In reality, perhaps the spread is probably not going to be quite as much, but to illustrate the point, you can see how these sites might sit in relation to each other. So as you can see, we've suggested that over here on the right-hand side of the screen, that perhaps Apple's site is the most design-led of all 5, followed closely by Microsoft's. eBay, I think, is a good balance. It's a nice clean design. They've used design well to highlight and section off content, yet they're presenting a very content-driven offering at the same time. It's a good balance, so somewhere in the middle. Amazon, likewise, perhaps a little bit more functional than eBay, presenting a massive range of products and using design in a clean, functional way. We saw the emphasis on navigation, finding products, similar to eBay, to present that content in an organized fashion. And then over on the left-hand side, the super functional Google search page. Very little going on at all to detract from the page's intended function. So it's an interesting exercise, just, taking a look at some example sites and thinking, how are they using design? You might want to try that process yourself. Call up some sites, perhaps sites that you regularly visit, and ask yourself the question, are they design-led or are they content-led? How are they using design effectively to achieve their core objectives? And again, we'll be talking about objectives shortly. The final thing we need to note when we're talking about the relative importance of design, the things that determine the importance of design for us, is our product and or niche that we're in. A good example of the niche determining the importance of design might be, for example, a photography website or a website design portfolio site. If your business is graphic design or photography, then there's an argument to say that your site's more likely to need to be more design orientated than content led for obvious reasons. Perhaps the design is actually your product, so you're more likely to make it more of a prominent feature. But for most people sitting this course right now, it's much more likely that you should be focusing far more on the content than on the design per se. Another quote from Paul Smithson: set your design compass. He says, I'm a massive planning fan. Any business looking to succeed online today has got to have a clear idea of where they're headed in terms of both content and design. With that thought in mind, we're going to move on to the next section, which is objectives and planning.